Professor, you've stated that advertising is a special case because people know that they're receiving advertising. But within that, where does commercial persuasion end and manipulation begin in advertising?
It's a great question. So we need to have a sense of what manipulation is first. And let's have a quick summary, which is manipulation is when you appeal to people's maybe non-reflective and non-deliberative capacities in their mind. And you don't manipulate people if you appeal to their deliberative and rational thinking capacities. Now, if you have an advertisement that's really boring and says, if you buy this product, you're going to save, a couple hours a week because it's going to help you do your work faster, that's definitely not manipulative. If you show someone who is, skipping to work joyfully because work is so much easier and faster now, I think that's okay, so long as it's truthful and it's not manipulating people. If you have something that appeals to people's non-rational, non-deliberative capacities by getting them all scared or by getting them all excited about something which on reflection shouldn't be a source of fear or excitement, now then you're crossing the line into manipulation. We should acknowledge that advertising is often directed toward getting people to be emotionally thrilled by a prospect of a purchase or emotionally a little worried about a prospect of not purchasing something. That's completely fine. So emotional appeals are fine. But if they're emotional appeals that bypass people's capacity for thinking out what's best, then we're getting into the territory of the manipulative.
So the ads are kind of sweeteners on top of their ability to reflect.
Well, it depends on what the sweetener looks like. So let's say that what's wrong with manipulation is the same thing that's wrong with deception, which is it makes it really hard for people to make a knowing choice for themselves. So if people are deceived by getting information that isn't really information, that if they buy, let's say, a new book on manipulation, they're never going to get sick again, that's deceptive. I say that against my own self-interest, but that is deceptive.
Right.
A book will not help you not get sick ever again. But if there's something that's manipulative, then people's capacity to think something through is also compromised. So it depends on what the sweetener is. If there's something that is hiding some term of a transaction, and the sweetener consists of a little shrouding of some characteristic, like after a month or two, you're going to have to pay a little extra, and that's not clearly on the surface, that's manipulative.
Now, should users know that they are being nudged? And how would that happen? Through labels or other mechanisms?
Okay, so a nudge consists of an intervention that steers people in a certain direction, but maintains their freedom of choice. So that's what a nudge is. Let's give some examples. If you buy a product and it has a fuel economy or energy efficiency label on it, so it tells you this refrigerator is super energy efficient, you're going to save this amount of money over the course of a year. Because of that, that's a nudge. If you have a GPS device that tells you if you want to get from Chicago to New York, here's what you do, that's nudging you all the way, and that's not manipulative at all. You can say to the device, actually, I don't want to go to New York, I want to go to Lewiston, Maine. That's up to you. Or if you think the GPS device is nudging you on a certain route and you want to go a place that's more familiar or prettier, you can completely do that. So it's freedom of choice. A nudge could be an educative intervention, like a label that tells you about this has a lot of salt, this has a lot of calories, this has a lot of sugar. That's a nudge. It educates you, it informs you, and a lot of advertising is educative nudges. And so long as they're truthful and not kind of tricky or trying to get you to think something that's not true, that there's nothing manipulative about that. Some nudges are architectural. That is, it might be that if you buy a product, you're automatically enrolled in an insurance program. It might be that if you buy a product, you're automatically going to get some service for the next couple of months. Now, if you're not given clarity about what you're automatically enrolled in, now we're talking about manipulation, because you haven't been given a fair shot at making a deliberative choice. So nudges, if they are educative, aren't manipulative. If they're architectural, that is, it's something about the design of a website or something about the arrangement of a contract, they won't be manipulative so long as they're completely transparent and they allow you to consent or not. If there's something where it's kind of like a magician, where they're diverting the eye, don't look here and here, but the hand's going, then we're talking about something manipulative through advertising.
Yeah, misdirection. Do you think that if a person believes that they're offering if a product and a service, or a product of high quality at a fair price, if they believe that, but it's not true, are they manipulating?
Not necessarily.
Yes.
So suppose someone's selling, let's say, an automobile part, and they think it's great and it's cheap, but the fact is it breaks down quickly and it's pretty expensive. There's no manipulation there.
Right.
It's just a bad deal. So what we need to watch out for, and I think this is often for people voluntarily to make decisions and sometimes for government, is when consumers are being tricked or fooled, not necessarily through a lie, but through something that gives them a reduced capacity to make their own autonomous choice.
Right.
That's kind of a mouthful, but if you're buying cereal, you can think, here's what the cereal has in it. It tastes really great. It's not that healthy, I get that, but I want a delicious breakfast. If the company is straightforward about it and doesn't try to trick you, then we're not dealing with a problem of manipulation. And if the company wrongly thinks the product is great and cheap, that's not ideal. But probably the company's not going to survive very long in the market if the product
Right.
isn't any good, but it's not manipulating people. It's just misunderstanding the amazingness of what it's selling.
Oh, should designers of choice architecture be held to ethical codes like doctors, lawyers?
I think so. I think this is really a growth area. So people who design choice architecture are involved in advertising, they're involved in website design, they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're people who produce laptops and sell laptops, everything under the sun. You can design a choice architecture in a way that is completely fair to purchasers, and maybe it leads purchasers to be a little more excited than they would be if the choice architecture weren't so clever, but it's fine. Or you could have choice architecture that's deceptive, or choice architecture that is manipulating people. We do need ethical codes, and they need to be kind of up to date to combat manipulation and deception. There's a term called dark patterns for online practices, which maybe hide certain terms or make it really easy for you to enroll in a service, but really to get out of it, you have to go to some place in Ethiopia where they don't have a whole lot of airplanes or traffic, and you have to find the single person in Ethiopia. I'm exaggerating, of course. But that easy in, hard out, that's a form of manipulation.
Yeah.
I think we do need ethical codes, and we need to start by having clarity on what manipulation is.
Right.
When once we do that, we kind of burrow in to see which practices count as indefensibly manipulative.
How do you think, as a practical question, I've tried to understand what you've written as well as I can. How do you think you fill in the understanding through examples or through empirical data? How would that be done? Like literally, how could we help by using all the certificates to fill in situations they see?
I'm very grateful for that. So I'm thinking there are two things that really are crucial to figure out whether a practice is a reason for concern. One is does it enable consumers to make informed choices? Do they consent? So if you buy, let's say, a product that has maybe a continuing relationship to the seller, is there consent on the part of the consumer to all of the terms? If there is consent, then we have a check mark, it's fine. If consent is not there because people are agreeing to terms that they didn't know they were agreeing to, then we have an X. And we can think of some hard cases where there's consent isn't completely clear. Maybe some parts of the consumer population, they completely know what they're getting into. Some of them don't. Maybe the ones who don't aren't paying enough attention. Then we have a hard case. So the first question is, are people consenting? The second question is there harm? So if you get people in a relationship where they buy a product and they pay, let's say, what is a reasonable price by market standards, but then they're also paying some extra amount every month for the next 10 years, we really want to make sure they're consenting to that. You know, it's free markets. I was at Chicago for a long time. I'm very excited about free markets, very pro-free markets. But if people are being harmed because of a contractual term or an obligation that they didn't know what they were getting into, then as Tom Hanks said when he was an astronaut, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, and as P&G says, they consider ethics to be a competitive advantage. If, however, the state of play in the ad industry gets to a point where nobody believes anything, that's not helpful to anybody.
Completely. So
Yeah.
I think one of the great things about the American ad industry when it's working well, and it often is that you can trust.
Right.
Not everything, but basically.
Right.
So I recently bought a car and I looked at ads and then I did a little research online and I love the car I got and the ads were fair and the consumer information was basically consistent with the ads and the market was working beautifully. But of course there are, I hope not, close to a majority, it's a minority, but where the market isn't working and people are at a competitive advantage if they either deceive or manipulate. And that isn't in the interest of companies in the long run.
Right. We're interested in this notion of co-regulation within the ad industry, or what Douglas Michael in that paper called audited self-regulation. How do you think that would work, and do you think that would work, and what are your thoughts on
Well,
that?
I think it can work. So with respect to most practices that reasonable people have, they can work, they don't always work. So if you have a system of self-regulation, which as a longtime University of Chicago person, I think has big advantages over government mandates, if you can make it work. With a system of self-regulation, first you have precepts or requirements or codes or ideas that people share, and then you need a process by which we test to see whether the code or the precepts are being followed. And it can work if you have relatively clear requirements or principles, and then you have an independent group that's not, an adversary or enemy. It's people who have respect for other people, but an independent group that is making sure the practice is consistent with the principles. If the people who are engaging in the audit are the same as the people who are being audited, that's not so great.
Right.
But if they're working with the people who are being audited, that's essential,
Right.
so that people have clarity on what's actually being done.
How do you think behavioral science could help design ethical AI that decides for users?
Okay, let's talk about behavioral science first. So behavioral science is, in my view, the most exciting and informative stream of research in the last half century. We now know more than we ever did about human beings and how they think and decide. So of course we knew a lot in 1960, but we know a lot more in the 2020s. And the reason is we know that people are subject to systematic errors. The human brain is a marvel, so most of the time we get it right. But people are often focused on the short term, like today really matters. Next decade, it's a foreign country, later land, who knows if we're going to visit. People tend to be unrealistically optimistic. So that's kind of good. If you're running from a tiger, you better think, I'm really fast. No tiger can catch me, rather than I'm doomed. So evolutionarily, we tend to be unrealistically optimistic. That can create problems with respect to consumer choices. We might think, this product is going to work forever, even though we're given information that it's going to last 4 or 5 years. We tend to show loss aversion. We really hate losses. We hate losses about twice as much as we like gains. These are things we've learned about people. These are generalities about our species. If you learn about behavioral science, you're in a position to be a really good advertiser. So you can appeal to people's biases, not race or gender biases like people are present bias, they're optimistic bias. You can exploit those. That's regrettable, or you can kind of work with a sympathetic and bemused understanding of those biases and not exploit them. So we really do need to know about behavioral biases to know how advertising works best, how it works less well, how it can be fair to people, how it can be less fair to people. With AI, we can help people make choices among products with reference to advertisements that are really well suited to their situation. So if people are buying products and are, let's say, not dealing very well with risks of breakdown of a product, let's say risk of malfunction, risk of misuse, AI can help you. It can say this one tends to break within a year. It's cheap, so maybe you want to get it anyway,
Right.
but it tends to break within a year. This one is very hard to handle unless you really know what you're doing. And AI can tell you like that, this is what you have to do to make sure you use it properly.
Right.
Of course, the diversity of products is near infinite, so how AI can help is also near infinite. But you can use AI to counteract people's behavioral biases, and consumers can be assisted in saying, what's best for me given my situation?
I've asked a lot of people this, and I'm curious about this. One of the men who helped to start the IE was originally worked for the FTC, Wally Snyder, and he tried to bring a case against children's advertising in total on television. The principle was persuasive intent. Children don't have the cognitive capability to understand that they are being persuaded to, because of the distance between an infant and an adult, cognitively. But doesn't now, I really mean this, doesn't now the distance between a supercomputer and a human being dwarf that between a child and an adult? So what position are we in to make any choices now?
Okay, it's a great and deep question. Let's think of 3 things in ascending order of complexity. There's information. So my main area of law is administrative law. I've taught it for decades. I've read so many cases. It's the only area of law I really know a ton of cases. AI knows much more about administrative law than I do. And I've worked on it for decades. AI can tell you things that I will dimly remember or that I don't know if I ever knew. So information AI can crush people. So the distance between me and I have a daughter who's 12 years old. The difference between me and my 12-year-old daughter is smaller than the distance between AI and me with respect to knowledge of facts. That's point 1. Point 2 is that human beings make systematic errors, and this is the behavioral science part. So we might think that the risk of something terrible happening in some place is really high. The reason we think that is we heard of a case in which it happened. That's wrong. The case was an outlier. And AI shouldn't show that mistake. That's a Nobel Prize winning insight that human beings show something called availability bias. Something's cognitively available, they'll exaggerate the risk. AI shouldn't show that. It might, but it ought not to show that. So cognitive biases are things AI ought not to show. My 12-year-old daughter shows more cognitive biases, I believe, than I do, though I'm not sure. She's really good at making judgments, but the average 12-year-old should be less good than the average adult, and maybe that's true in my family also. AI would be better on that front also. The other thing AI is better at, the third, is that human beings show variability in judgments. And this is something very important and not sufficiently appreciated. So like if a doctor is tired on a Friday afternoon, the doctor might say to the patient, go home, we'll see how you feel on Monday. Whereas if the same patient comes in on Monday morning, the doctor would say, we're going to test you.
Right.
And that's noise across judgments, unwanted variability in judgments. It happens in companies too, that someone in a company might say, you know, I'm going to hire that person because my favorite sports team won on Sunday. And someone else whose favorite sports team lost on Sunday would say, I'm in a sour mood. We're not hiring anybody today. And AI shouldn't show that kind of noise in judgment. So more information, less cognitive bias, less noise. And along all those counts, much better than people. Still, there are some things that people can do better, either because they'll have more information on the spot than AI can. So if there's, let's say, a doctor dealing with a patient, it may be the doctor can learn on the spot, there's something about this patient that makes me confident they don't have a really bad health problem,
Right.
even though some of the data is not so good. And if the doctor's experienced and alert to details, the doctor might be right, and AI might not have access to that. So there are some people who outperform AI just because they're very good at absorbing information on the spot, and AI has a hard time getting access to that.
What sort of tool do you imagine we could build to reduce manipulation in advertising?
Well, we could have, let's say, a state-of-the-art ethical code that has principles and that has specification of the principles. So the first thing, we're going to be really old school here, a code that treats manipulation as a wrong and adapts the judgment about what's wrong to the context. So a doctor would have less scope to, let's say, persuade the patient to do things than an advertiser. Advertisers are in the persuasion business, that's okay. So, but still the code would be drawing lines that people couldn't cross. That would be, let's say, old school. A newer way to do it would be to work with AI and large language models. This could be done now, to say, help me design a code to control manipulation in advertising. And you will get, almost instantly, a code from, I'm thinking of 3 large language models that are very good. You could get from 3. And then you could see what are the best of each of the 3. And it may be that you'd mix and match. Or it might be that each of them is 70% of the way there. And then you could interact with the one that's maybe the best and say, make it a little more forgiving of, or make it a little more stringent, or make it a little more forgiving with respect to this and a little more stringent with respect to that. And what I'm exploring here, I haven't done it myself, but is the possibility of using a large language model to generate a code to constrain manipulation, which could be done, I say, in 15 minutes.
Those are my questions, sir. Thank you for having me, and
Thank you for the visit.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.